Hey guys, welcome to BP, the Bible Perspective. Welcome to part 7 of Never Bring Ignorance to a Debate, dissecting the Larry Elder's interview on the Breakfast Club. Now, before we get into it, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. I am dissecting in a very slow crawl through this interview Larry Elder's appearance on the Breakfast Club. Now, the Breakfast Club is um, a urban entertainment show for the most part, aimed at an urban audience, a young urban audience. So Larry appearing on the show is kind of out of pocket. It's not his normal audience, but he's running for president. So I guess that's why he's broadening his audience, at least appearance. I'm pretty sure he knows he's not going to win this audience, but we can give him credit for appearing on the Breakfast Club, a black audience. Now, most of the Republican candidates that you see won't. Now, can't say for sure if they've been invited or not, but you don't see a lot of Republicans going outside of their box. Now, what is interesting about this interview is Larry being a black conservative. And I'm going to say, I think he knows going on the Breakfast Club is safe. Now, I say that because whenever you see almost any platform that people build their audience from. So let's take, for example, the #1 news show on cable, Fox News. They say some of the most nonsense stuff, but they say it because their audience is going to accept it. The audience won't question it. Now, in fairness, that's any audience. Anyone, you could see any platform. It's the same. In fact, one platform is not acutely aware of the other. So in other words, with Fox News, you wouldn't know about what Fox News is saying unless MSNBC talk about Fox News. Or someone else, you'll see these interviews where people will ask, someone who doesn't even watch Fox News, what do you think about what Fox News said about you? Okay. The reality is that one platform, for the most part, is not even aware of the other platform. So Larry Elders is a black conservative. And as a black conservative, in typical fashion, there is a talking point that they know, that they stick to, that the white audience, which is his primary audience, is going to accept. And basically is black people are bad, white people, let's not even talk about the guilt, right? And so you craft a lot of talking points to deflect. Now, this is the main purpose here. The talking point that you hear a black conservative, and for that matter, any conservative, but especially a black conservative, and I say that now only because we're talking about Larry Elders. He's the focus point of this video. But the purpose of the talking point is to deflect away from the guilt and the sin and the wrong of what white America has done. Now, all these stats that he's talking about, all of the 75% of black women give birth to fatherless babies, right? And all of that is designed to deflect from the wrong of white people. It is to protect, or it is to ease and comfort white guilt, while at the same time blaming black people. You're the problem, black people, not white people. So that's kind of the essence of what is going on. Now, my title, Never Bring Ignorance to a Debate, is more aimed at the Breakfast Club. And while I don't expect for DJ Envy and Charlemagne the God to go in depth, to bring depth to the argument. Their news commentator, their analysis commentator, Teslan Figueroa, I did expect a little more. Now, that's not to say I don't lay blame on the Breakfast Club, because if you're going to invite someone on your show, you certainly should do the homework. And I feel that they could have brought a better argument. They could have refuted Larry's talking points much better. I'm doing it just by a simple Google. And so the one of the reasons why I'm going, and I'm going point by point here with this talking point and dissecting it, showing you where he's wrong, where the context is not, he's not given the proper context. And again, overall, what his purpose is to deflect from the sin of white America, what they did specifically to black America, the effect of what they did. And this is something that you would, it's hard for America to grapple. In other words, when you talk about nearly 400 years of brutal, evil, torture, rape, dehumanizing of an entire group of people that ended only 50 years ago, and with callousness you want to say, black people, you need to get up, get over it, and move on. But you never say, white people, you need to come to grips of, this is what you did for this amount of time. As I said before, one of their typical arguments today is, well, everybody had slavery. Or, Africans sold fellow Africans into slavery. Now, while that's true, that's a deflection. Because if the white people at the time considered Africans as savages, why did you, as good God-fearing, superior race people, buy slaves, buy humans whom Jesus died for on the cross, that you claim is you are a God-fearing nation? And then you mistreated God's children. You mistreated Americans, natural-born Americans. So this is all that Larry is deflecting from. So let's continue on with the debate. Now, as I said, I believe that the Breakfast Club should have bought a better game. They should have refuted a lot of his talking points. And I believe one of the reasons why they didn't is because they did not have the answers. So let's get into it.
The Asian community, it's easy for them to get loans for entrepreneurships. It's easy for them to get loans for houses. You look at our community.
Okay.
If you really want to talk about our community, right? You look at the schools in our community. Some of our schools are the worst, right? Would you agree with that? Yes or no?
Absolutely. Which
Right.
is why.
They don't have Wi-Fi, don't have education,
Which is
don't
why
have
one
books.
of the reasons I'm running for president is for school choice.
Also, would you say that it's in our community
That's also
is
systemic. By the way.
it's also in our communities heavy food deserts. There's nothing but fast food places that are just killing and destroying that. Would you say that's true?
Systemic too. By the way.
Boy.
Would you say that's true? I'm just asking a question.
You said a number of things. I just addressed one of
Now, I said this in the last video that I believe the argument here doesn't make sense, because the food deserts, there are a lot of problems, and one of the issues when we deal with the problems of Black America is kind of twofold. In one respect is how we got here, and then the other is the reality of that we're here. Now, another thing is what the fault of the argument here is, when he says food deserts, you're talking about poor neighborhoods. Now, here's the reality. The poor neighborhoods are always going to be disenfranchised. The poor neighborhoods are always going to be poor. So when you check, and this is, by the way, this is any poor neighborhood. So whether it's white, black, if you look at the stats, right, you look at the conditions of the Native Americans. Now, this is something that's never talked about. Why? Because, again, they get good money from the government and they have a lot of land. But when you look at what's going on, a lot of the ills that's going on with just Native Americans in their communities. My point is this. So what he's talking about, these neighborhoods in which he's living in don't affect where he lives at. I mean, DJ Envy, um, Charlemagne the God, they make good money and they live in good neighborhoods. Now, when you go to Brooklyn, for example, if you go to Brooklyn and you go to the area where Spike Lee has his studios, I've seen it. I've been there. It's actually not too far from my sister. I have a sister that lives in Brooklyn, not too far from where she lives. Within walking distance. A nice walk, but walking distance. It is a beautiful area, though. It's a mixed area. So the conditions that Envy just is talking about doesn't exist in that area of Brooklyn, where Spike Lee lives at. Now, I don't know where they live at. They may live in the same neighborhood. But of course, when you go to poor neighborhood, and my point of driving this home here is that neighborhood doesn't affect the entirety or doesn't speak to the whole of the black community. This has always been the problem. We allow ourselves to be labeled a monolithic when we're not. So now the problems of poor schools, which I agree, is horrendous. But there are other issues with that. For example, the administrations, many of which are run by black people. Now Larry's going to bring that up in a moment. But the idea that these happen in marginalized neighborhoods, but they don't happen. In other words, this is not everywhere you go in a black community, this is what you're going to see. Out of the nearly 40 million black people that live in America, every time you go to a black neighborhood, that's what you're going to see. That's the picture that the Breakfast Club is allowing to be painted. Here we go.
Them about
Sure.
loans. In 1965, Barack Obama, who was in private practice, joined a bunch of other lawyers to file a class action lawsuit against Citicorp, which is headquartered here in New York. 186 black people were applying for loans for mortgages and didn't get them. And they accused Citicorp of engaging in racism. Citicorp said, no, it's not racism. You have poor credit scores, and we want to make sure we get our money back. Obama joined a bunch of other lawyers, and they sued Citicorp in a class action lawsuit. And Citicorp said, okay, to hell with it. Gave them all loans. And they followed them all up. Daily Caller did a few years later. Almost all of them lost their homes. Several of them filed for bankruptcy. One of them even said, when you don't qualify for a loan, maybe we shouldn't get a loan. Well, duh. It wasn't true that black people were not getting loans. Plus, there are all sorts of black-owned community banks around the country, and it turns out the turn-down rate when you apply for a loan at a community bank was even higher because they had less capital and they couldn't afford to loan money to risky people. It is just not the case that the reason for the plight of the black community is because people were not lending money to them. It's just not true.
That's not true. But
Let me push back on what he said. This is in 2020. Citicorp launches more than $1 billion strategic initiative to help close the racial gap. That's the Citicorp that he just mentioned, now in 1995. He said New York City and City Foundation, they announced more than $1 billion in strategic initiative to help close the racial wealth gap and increase economical mobility in the United States. City Action for Racial Equity is a comprehensive approach to, one, providing greater access to banking and credit in communities of color. 2, increasing investment in black-owned business. 3, expanding home ownership among black Americans. And 4, advancing anti-racist practice in the financial service industry. Now, this article goes on, but this article was actually put out in 2020. So this is from the Citicorp that he just talked about. Now, why am I bringing this up, and why am I counteracting what he said? Because again, he only painted one picture. Now, if Citicorp gave out loans to people that were not qualified, then shame on them. I said this earlier. But at the same time, notice Citicorp themselves is acknowledging the racial disparities enough to where they are saying this is what we want to do about it. Let's continue.
Well, hold on 1 second, Charlamagne. Well, so
What's not
you're
true?
bringing back facts of 1965, right? Let's talk 2023, right?
I said 1995.
1995. We talk 2023, right? My son will be successful in real estate and successful in buying a house. You know why? Because his father owns a house.
Because
his
of
father
you.
owns a house, right? But my father
Because
and
of you and
his
the drive.
sister and
Because of
his,
you and the
his
drive you
family
put into
did
him.
not own houses.
Because of you and the drive you put into him.
If we're not going to have a conversation,
You're not even appreciating what you've done to your son.
I'm just asking you a question. I just let you speak and I'll let you talk.
Okay.
Y'all can talk.
We have a conversation.
All right.
But when we talk about it, right, it's harder for our community to get loans, right? And not just because of poor credit scores, it's because of where the areas are. You talked about the Asian community. A lot of the Asian community have their own banks and they're able to process and get their own banks. There's not too many African American branches that are able to give out money. So that's one. Then let's talk about getting grants for schools. They're not even giving grants for schools at the rate that they're giving grants for white people. And let's talk about when they talk about entrepreneurship. They are giving so much money to these white and Asian kids and Asian people doing it, and a 1,000 times less than our community. Will you agree to any of that?
No, I don't.
Well, I think he's asking the wrong question to the wrong person. He's never going to agree to it. He's been sitting on your show telling you he doesn't agree to it. But again, I did read this in part 5, part 6, and I'm just going to read the title. It says, Bank to pay $31 million for avoiding mortgages to minorities, largest such settlement in the U.S. history. So talking about this, the Justice Department accused the Los Angeles-based City National Bank. So again, when he's saying that there's no, again, racial disparities, story after story here, and this, by the way, this was in January of 2023. The City Corp Bank, that article I just read, was from 2020. So when he said that there is no, watch it, and then he says, here's kind of a line here. The Justice Department says that between 2017 and 2020. So this is, again, this is not, as they always say, ancient history. It's a City National avoided marketing and underwriting mortgages in majority black and Latino neighborhoods in Los Angeles County. Other banks operating in those neighborhoods receive 6 times the number of mortgage application that City National did, according to the federal officials. Now, again, you can go and look this up and read this. My point is to counteract this idea that there are no racial stumbling blocks that's put between black people today. I think DJ Envy's fault is he's trying to get him to agree to something without giving facts. In other words, you said something and then you said, do you not agree with that? And of course, Larry is going to say, I don't agree with it. He's been telling you throughout the show, and for decades, he's been spewing the talking points. But here are facts. 2 facts. Here we go.
I don't agree with virtually any of what you just now said. The turn down rate for a white applicant for a mortgage is higher than the turn down rate for a Japanese or a Chinese applicant for a mortgage. Now, are you telling me that banks are discriminating against white and in favor of Asian Americans? It's because their credit scores are better. They often live below their means. They save more, even when they're making the same amount of money than black people do. If you have poor credit score, you're not going to get a loan. Period. End of statement. Even
that's it. I just read you just 2 examples, and there are a lot more. So the idea, again, what he's saying is that the white society is just fair and equitable and honest. You know, again, it's just nonsense. Um, Here we go.
Even
But
the
sir,
head
it's
of
more white
even the
people.
head of
But a
Urban
minute,
League, even the head of Urban League, a black man once said that if you have poor credit score, you're not going to get a loan. End of statement.
sir,
Yes.
let's just okay.
But again, see, again, notice the deflection. It's not only people with low credit score. And by the way, I know white people who have had low credit scores who have gotten loans. I personally know them. Um, but it is also people who had good credit who were turned down. People with good credit. The idea of redlining is banks and financial institutions marking out certain neighborhoods regardless of a credit score. But if they saw that your address, they were turning you down.
Okay. When you were talking about crime, you weren't prepared to talk about disproportion. You talked about how it was more black people that was doing it, and then you talked about how we're the smaller, of the population. The same applies also to the loans. It's more white people than it is black people. You seem to pick and
I'm
choose
talking
when
about the
you want
rate.
to do
I'm talking about the rate.
right.
Now she's absolutely true. He's switching up. Before it was, well, when he talked about crime, it's you talking about the mass shooters. Well, you have to balance that out according to Larry because there are more white people, thus lowering the percentage. Now, when it comes to um, uh, more white people being turned down, again, he's switching. He's changing the terms here.
Whatever it is, the bottom line is it's more white people than it is black people. And so if more black people are not getting loans disproportionately, it seems you'd only want to apply the disproportion to the conversation when it benefits your talking points.
I'm not sure you
which is
understood.
why they said
I'm not sure you
no, I
understood. I'm
understood.
not sure you understood my point. That's why I mentioned in 1995 when 186 black people who were not getting loans filed a class action lawsuit claiming that they were denied the loan because of racism. Citicorp said, okay, here are your loans. The reason I wasn't giving you the loans is because we're afraid you weren't going to be able to pay them back.
I'm not talking about
Fast
this,
forward,
sir.
they weren't able to pay.
I think they should have said one. They should have Googled just as I did. They should have Googled and just come up with just these two cases to refute what they're saying. Find out the particular argument that they said too. You'll find that probably City Court did not say what he is saying. He's taking something, and I'm not disputing in 1995 what he said happened, but I would say it probably didn't happen the way that he said it. Regardless, um, look at what Citicorp is saying now, uh, years later.
Pay them back, which proves the
Sir, I'm not
Citicorp's
talking
point.
about that. I'm not talking
I know
about
you're
that. I'm
not,
talking about your
because
response.
inconvenient.
I'm talking about your response to Envy when you said more white people get approved for loans.
Since you
I'm
like
not talking
numbers,
about that.
Washington Post
said-
said black Americans have the highest denial rates for purchase and refinance of loans, according to Home Mortgage Disclosures Act.
Because of
20%
their credit
black
score.
and all credit scores are the same. 15% of Hispanic loan applicants were denied, compared with about 11% of white and 10% of Asian applicants with same credit scores. And that's Washington Post, since you love numbers so much, and I know you do love numbers. That's coming from the Washington Post. That's 2023, not 1995.
I can show you a study that says the opposite.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Then they should have made him show it. Now, what they should have done is made him say, "Well, cite it. Let's Google it." As you can see, they got laptops sitting up there, and with a simple Google, DJ Envy came up with a credible stat that proved on record that said, regardless of credit scores, we knew this happened during the real estate crunch of around 2008, where there were black people who had credit scores of 700, 750, 800, but were still either denied or were given subprime loans. Okay, so again, what is Larry's point? Let's dissect, let's deflect away from the racism that he is so vehemently trying to deny and or defend or ignore.
Mr. Elder, Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and I'm pretty sure everybody who just caught a RICO with him in Georgia, they all had fathers, and they still ended up in jail. How did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
Now he's switching. I'm gonna let him respond to this, and then um, I think it's a good question. I certainly think it's a good point because remember, before we get into this, Larry started off the interview saying that the absence of fathers in black homes is the reason why blacks are at the bottom of the social ladder. That the reason for the plight of black America is the absence of fathers. So this is a good response from Charlemagne the God. Here we go.
Nobody
Well, let me
said
help.
nobody said if you have a father you won't go to jail. And nobody said if you didn't have a father you were going to jail. My father never
But
knew
guess
his.
what you did say,
Can,
Mr.
can,
Elder?
can,
I'm sorry, respectfully.
may I
Guess,
answer?
no,
May I
let
answer
me
his
just say this.
question?
Guess what you did
May
say.
I
I'm
answer
going
his
to help you
question?
because I know.
Let him finish his statement, Ted.
I think they should have pressed him too, and I kind of applaud her. Now she got criticized because she's coming off as being kind of aggressive. Like I say, let me just say this about Tesla and the criticism that she's got. I think she's focusing on the wrong issues or the wrong kind of her wrong method. But in this particular case, she should press him because exactly what he said at the beginning of the interview, that it is because, in fact, remember he said that the mob, right, which he did not know, he could not and ever know that the mob that was vandalizing these uh, um, business in these areas, or this Los Angeles, New York, or Chicago. Remember, Larry said that the reason why they do that is because of the action. Now, the reason why they do that is because of they have no fathers in the home. But remember, he said that the reason why these mobs, of course, the black mobs, the black youth, and he said that they have no fathers in the home. Now, of course, I pushed back and said, how does he know? They just could be knuckleheads from two homes. Now, watch this. So now the issue comes up that Donald Trump comes from a two-parent home. Look at his behavior. I'm going to add Epstein, Weinstein, all of these people who are celebrities, who are politicians, who commit crime, and they come from two-parent homes. Now he wants to move the goalposts. He wants to move the goalposts. Here we go.
My
Okay.
father never knew his biological father. He got thrown out of the house when he was 8, when he was 13 years old. 8th grade dropout, Jim Crow South, Athens, Georgia. Fast forward, my dad cleaned toilets, 2 full-time jobs cleaning toilets when I was growing up. Went to night school to get his GED, and then after that, he went to night school to learn how to operate a small restaurant. Age of 47, my dad saves his nickels and dimes from his job, starts a small restaurant near downtown L.A. Fast forward, he retires in his 80s. He owned that restaurant. He owned property next door, plus the house that's still in our family. Not too shabby.
So I want to understand how come he didn't turn out to be a thug? If Larry's father, which would make Larry's grandfather, wasn't in his life, wasn't in his father's life, why didn't his father turn out to be a thug then? Because Larry said the kind of mere absence of a father, the mere absence of a father in black homes. And I want to kind of clarify because he's talking about black homes, that the absence of fathers in a black home is the reason why there are thugs and there's crime and there's violence and there's unruliness in black homes. Now that he's talking about white homes, he's going to move the goalposts.
For somebody who did not know his biological father. It's not a death sentence. You still have choices. It's just much, much more difficult to raise a child on your own. Even Tupac Shakur said, "I know for a fact." Tupac, excuse me. I know for a fact. Had I had a father, I would have been more confident. I would have been more disciplined. End of quote.
Well, how did all
Well, first of all, okay, Um, again, he's moving the goalposts. So the fact is, so you can make choices. In other words, you could you could do okay and not be the product of a two-parent home. Now, as I said before, remember there are other reasons for fatherlessness, like a time of war. Remember, we um, just came out of almost a 20-year war that produced, I think, over, I forgot what the number is, but thousands of fatherless homes because soldiers were killed. We can go back into the Vietnam War, Korean War, World War One and Two, and of course the Civil War. They produced fatherless homes. So my question then to Larry would be: is it only black black communities, black homes that seem to suffer most from fatherless that produce thugs and criminals? Question mark.
Those white
Okay.
men end up in jail when they still had fathers. The Trumps and the Giuliani. I'm just asking the question. Like, how did they end up in jail? Even if they all had fathers.
Because some people commit crimes.
No, sir. Stop. My apologies for interrupting you earlier. I just couldn't stomach the answer that I knew you were going to say.
Couldn't stomach the answer.
Yeah, I couldn't stomach because your actual answer to Trump being what was happening to him with the indictments, you actually said that the system was doing it. You said there was a two-tier system. This is your words.
That's right.
That it was a two-tier system. So when it came to Trump, all of a sudden you now believe in this system.
All right, I'm going to kind of stop it here and pick it up in part 8. Uh, when she when she talks about the system of justice, um, but I think they did make some good points. Uh, but at the same time, notice how Larry is moving the goalposts here. All right, guys, let's pick it up in part 8 of not bringing ignorance to a debate, dissecting the Larry Elder's interview on the Breakfast Club. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. I'll see you in part 8.